So, think about this. In the entire long, dramatic history of the Catholic Church, being the Pope is a job for life. That's a divine calling, right? It's something you don't just walk away from. But in 2013, one man did exactly that, and it sent absolute shockwaves across the globe. This is the story of the Pope who quit. And just like that, with those words, Pope Benedict XVI announced the unthinkable. He was resigning. Now, this wasn't some leader being forced out by scandal or politics. No, this was the Pope, the successor to St. Peter, basically saying, I can't do this job anymore. The announcement left 1 billion Catholics and pretty much the rest of the world just stunned. And that right there, that's why this was such a massive deal. It had been 600 years since a pope had willingly stepped down from the job. I mean, it was an act so rare, so completely unheard of in the modern world, that it kind of changed how we look at this 2,000-year-old institution. Okay, so to really get a handle on this revolutionary act, we have to go back. We have to understand the man himself. Who exactly was Joseph Ratzinger before he became Pope Benedict XVI? What was going on in the mind of the guy who would make this incredible decision? See, Joseph Ratzinger, he grew up in Bavaria, Germany, in a very devout Catholic family. And from a pretty young age, his path seemed kind of set. He was brilliant, super intellectual, and was really drawn to the priesthood. His life wasn't about big political moves, but more about quiet, intense study and faith. At his core, he was a scholar, a thinker. And if you look at his career, you can see this clear, steady climb. This wasn't some flashy, meteoric rise. It was a journey that took decades, moving up through the church's academic and administrative ladders, from priest, professor, then archbishop and cardinal, and finally, he was the head of the Vatican's Office for Doctrine, basically the church's chief theological enforcer. So yeah, every single step was built on his reputation as this towering intellect. And you know what really tells you almost everything you need to know about him? It's the motto he chose as an archbishop: cooperators of truth. Think about that. Not power, not glory, but truth. He saw his entire mission, whether he was a professor or the Pope, as this constant search for and defense of what he believed were these essential, unchangeable truths. Right, so when this professor becomes Pope in 2005, he brings that whole mission right into the Vatican with him. And his 8 years as Pope were really defined by this powerful conviction to defend that truth and tradition in a world he felt was, well, kind of losing its way. And this was his big intellectual fight. He called it the dictatorship of relativism. It's the idea that there's no real objective truth, especially when it comes to morality, that everything is kind of up for grabs. For Benedict, this wasn't just some dusty academic debate. He saw it as the biggest crisis of our time, and he believed the church was the last line of defense against it. And you could literally see this fight in the things he did. He brought back the elaborate traditional clothes of popes from centuries ago. He encouraged using Latin more and made it easier for churches to celebrate the old traditional Latin Mass. Now, some people saw this and thought, whoa, he's turning back the clock. But for him, it was all about reconnecting the church to the beauty and the permanence of its oldest traditions. But look, his time as Pope wasn't all about ideas and fancy robes. He inherited the single greatest crisis to face the modern church: the clergy's sexual abuse scandal. And where his predecessor, John Paul II, had largely, looked the other way, Benedict was actually the first pope to begin to truly take it on. And he took some really big steps no one had taken before. He met with victims. That was unheard of. He apologized over and over again for the church's failures and started the process of stripping protection from known abusers. Now, his own past record as an archbishop would come under fire later, for sure, but his actions as pope, they were a real, if very painful, turning point in how the Vatican dealt with this devastating issue. So you put all that together, the intellectual battles, the focus on tradition, the tough stuff with the crisis, and it all leads us right back to that bombshell question. After all that, why did he decide to just walk away? I mean, really think about this for a second. This is a man who believes with every fiber of his being that his job is a sacred responsibility given by God. Popes are supposed to die in office, It underlines that only God can release them from that duty. So why? Why did he do it? Well, the reason he gave wasn't some big dramatic scandal. It was deeply human. He was 85 years old. He said very clearly, that his physical and mental strength had declined. In his own words, he just didn't have the capacity to do the job anymore. It was this incredible act of humility, of recognizing that the modern papacy just demanded a strength he no longer had. So, what do we do with a legacy like that? How do you make sense of this man? A fierce, fierce defender of tradition, whose most famous act was a radical break with tradition. It's a fascinating contradiction. It's like there were two sides to him. On one hand, you have the ultimate guardian of tradition, defending doctrine, bringing back ancient rituals. But then, on the other hand, he's this radical innovator, the first pope in 600 years to just quit, the first to really start tackling the abuse crisis. And by doing that, he kind of demystified the whole thing. He showed that the man isn't the office, and that the office, well, it can be handed over. And that leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? By choosing to step down out of a sense of duty and humility, did this quiet scholar, this guardian of the past, accidentally become the ultimate innovator, setting a precedent that changes the papacy forever? It's a powerful thought, that his most enduring legacy might not be what he wrote or what he restored, but that simple revolutionary act of just stepping aside,